The stagecoach lurched to a halt outside the small depot in Douglas, Arizona Territory, and Olivia Vance felt her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her ribs. It was September 1883, and she had traveled nearly 2,000 miles from Philadelphia to marry a man she had never met, carrying nothing but a worn carpetbag and secrets that marked her skin like a road map of suffering. The dust settled around the coach wheels as she peered through the window at the rough wooden buildings lining the street, wondering which of the figures moving in the afternoon heat was Benjamin Drake, the rancher who had answered her advertisement with carefully written letters that promised kindness and a fresh start. She stepped down from the coach with trembling legs, her dark blue traveling dress already dusty from the long journey. The September heat hit her like a wall, so different from the cool autumn she had left behind in Pennsylvania. Around her, Douglas buzzed with activity despite the heat. Cowboys rode past on horseback, their spurs jingling. A wagon loaded with supplies creaked down the main street. Somewhere a blacksmith's hammer rang against an anvil. This was frontier country, wild and rough, but Olivia hoped it would be far enough from her past that she could finally breathe without fear. "Miss Vance." A deep voice spoke her name, and she turned to see a tall man approaching. He was perhaps 28 or 29, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that brushed his collar. His eyes were a striking blue-gray, like storm clouds, and he wore dusty work clothes and well-worn boots. A hat sat pushed back on his head, revealing a face that was handsome in a rugged way, with strong features and a cautious expression. This had to be Benjamin Drake. "Mr. Drake," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She was 23, but at this moment she felt much younger, uncertain and afraid despite her determination to start over. "Yes, madam, Benjamin Drake. Most folks just call me Ben." He reached for her bag with one hand and extended the other to her. His palm was calloused and warm when she placed her hand in his. "I hope your journey was not too difficult." "It was long, but I am well," Olivia said, meeting his eyes briefly before looking away. She was not used to kindness from men, and his gentle manner made her simultaneously hopeful and wary. Ben loaded her bag into a wagon that waited nearby, then helped her up onto the seat. His touch was careful, respectful. As he climbed up beside her and took the reins, Olivia studied him from the corner of her eye. His letters had been thoughtful, describing his ranch and his life with honest simplicity. He had written that he was looking for a wife because he was tired of being alone, because he wanted to build a family, and needed a partner to share the work and the life he was creating. He had not asked for beauty or refinement, only for honesty and willingness to work hard. Olivia had responded because she needed escape, needed distance from the nightmare her life had become, and because something in his words suggested he might be different from other men she had known. "The ranch is about 5 miles outside town," Ben said as they started moving. "It's not much yet, but I have been building it up for the past 6 years. I have cattle, some horses, a sturdy house. There is a Mexican woman, Señora Martinez, who comes twice a week to help with the heavier cleaning and cooking. She is very kind. I think you will like her." "It sounds fine," Olivia said quietly. She folded her hands in her lap, feeling the weight of the moment. In 2 days, they would be married by the circuit preacher who was due in Douglas. Until then, Ben had arranged for her to stay with a respectable family in town, the Hendersons, who ran the general store. It was all very proper, all carefully planned to preserve her reputation. "Miss Vance," Ben said after a moment of silence, "I know this is strange for both of us. I want you to know that I meant everything I wrote in my letters. I am looking for a partner, not a servant. I will not demand more from you than you are willing to give. I understand that trust takes time." Olivia felt unexpected tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back fiercely. "Thank you, Mr. Drake. I will do my best to be a good wife to you." "Just Ben, please," he said with a slight smile. "We are to be married. Seems like we should use first names. Then you must call me Olivia." They rode in silence for a while, and Olivia watched the landscape roll past. The terrain was unlike anything she had known in Pennsylvania. Desert stretched in every direction, dotted with scrub, brush, and cacti. Mountains rose in the distance, purple and hazy in the afternoon light. The sky was enormous, impossibly blue, without a single cloud. It was harsh country, unforgiving, but there was a stark beauty to it that caught at something in Olivia's chest. When they reached the ranch, Ben drove past the main house to show her the spread. She could see he took pride in what he had built. There were sturdy corrals, a barn in good repair, cattle grazing on rangeland that stretched toward distant hills. The house itself was adobe and wood, single-story but well-constructed, with a covered porch that would provide shade from the brutal sun. "It is very nice," Olivia said, and meant it. She could imagine making a life here, could picture herself cooking in the kitchen, tending a garden, raising children in this wide open space where the past could not reach her. But Ben did not stop at the house. Instead, he turned the wagon around and headed back toward town. "I will bring you to the Hendersons now. Tomorrow I will come by so we can talk more, get to know each other a bit before the wedding. If you need anything at all, you just tell Mrs. Henderson and she will get word to me." The Hendersons were a middle-aged couple with 3 grown children who had already left home to start their own families. Mrs. Henderson was a plump, cheerful woman with graying hair and a warm smile. She showed Olivia to a small but clean room and helped her unpack her few belongings. "Mr. Drake is a good man," Mrs. Henderson said as she helped Olivia hang her 2 dresses in the wardrobe. "He has had some hard times, lost his parents to fever 5 years back, but he has worked himself nearly to death to build up that ranch. He deserves some happiness. I hope you will bring him that, dear." "I will try," Olivia said softly. She did not add that she hoped he would bring her happiness too, or at least peace. That seemed like too much to ask for given everything. That night, Olivia lay in the narrow bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the frontier town. Somewhere a dog barked. Horses whinnied in a nearby stable. Men's voices drifted up from a saloon down the street, punctuated by occasional laughter. She thought about Benjamin Drake, about his kind eyes and careful manners. She thought about the ceremony that would take place in 2 days, binding her to a stranger forever. And she thought about the scars on her back, the raised welts that crisscrossed her skin like a grotesque web. She had not told him about them in her letters. How could she? How could she write words that would explain the brutality, the years of suffering? She had mentioned only that she was an orphan, raised by an uncle after her parents died when she was 12, and that she was eager to leave Philadelphia and start fresh. She had not mentioned that her uncle had been a monster, that he had used a horse whip on her for the smallest infractions, that she had endured 6 years of abuse before he finally drank himself to death and freed her. She had not mentioned that she had worked as a seamstress for 2 years, living in a tiny room and saving every penny for this escape. Would Ben reject her when he discovered the truth? Would he send her back, declare the marriage invalid because she had withheld such information? Or worse, would he see the scars and think she had deserved them somehow, that she had been a wicked girl who needed correction? These thoughts churned in her mind until exhaustion finally claimed her, and she slept fitfully, dreaming of whips and lashing rain and a voice shouting accusations in the darkness. The next day, Ben arrived mid-morning, driving the same wagon. He helped Olivia up, and they rode out of town together, heading not toward his ranch but in a different direction entirely. "I thought I might show you some of the country," he said. "Help you get your bearings, and I thought we might talk, get to know each other better." They followed a rough trail that wound between rocky outcroppings and stands of mesquite. Ben pointed out landmarks, told her about the neighbors scattered across the vast territory, explained the challenges of ranching in this arid climate. Olivia listened, asking occasional questions, slowly relaxing in his presence. He told her about his childhood, growing up on this same land when it had been his father's homestead. He described how his parents had dreamed of building something lasting, how they had worked side by side until the fever took them both within a week of each other. He spoke of his loneliness, of years spent working alone, of his growing realization that he needed more than just cattle and land to make life meaningful. "I am not a fancy man," he said at one point, his eyes on the trail ahead. "I do not have much education beyond reading and writing and figuring. I do not know poetry or music or any of the refined things. But I am honest and I am loyal, and I will work every day to provide for you and protect you. That is what I can offer." "That is more than enough," Olivia said quietly. "I do not need fancy things or poetry, I just need—" She paused, unsure how much to reveal. "I just need to feel safe." Ben turned to look at her then, his storm cloud eyes searching her face. "Safe from what, Olivia?" She looked away, her throat tight. "From the past, from cruelty, from being hurt again." There was a long silence. Then Ben pulled the wagon to a stop and set the brake. He turned to face her fully. "Did someone hurt you? Is that why you came out here, why you answered my advertisement?" Olivia could not meet his eyes. She stared at her hands, clutched tightly in her lap. "My uncle," she whispered. "After my parents died, I went to live with him. He was not a kind man. He drank, and when he drank, he became angry. He would find fault with everything I did, and he would punish me. When I was 19, he died, and I was finally free. I worked and saved money to come here, to start over where no one knows me." "What kind of punishment?" Ben's voice was very quiet, but there was an edge to it, something hard and dangerous. Olivia shook her head, unable to form the words. Ben reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she did not move, he took one of her hands in both of his. His grip was warm and gentle. "Olivia, look at me." She forced herself to raise her eyes to his face. "I need you to understand something," he said. "I will never, ever hurt you. I do not care what you did or did not do, what mistakes you might have made. There is no excuse for a man to brutalize someone weaker, someone in his care. Your uncle was a coward and a monster, and I am glad he is dead. You are safe now. I give you my word on that." The tears she had been holding back spilled over. She had not expected this, had not dared to hope that he would respond with such immediate, fierce protectiveness. "There is something you should know," she managed through her tears. "Something I did not tell you in my letters because I did not know how." "You can tell me anything," Ben said. He produced a handkerchief from his pocket and handed it to her. "He used a whip on me. Many times over many years. My back is covered in scars. I know it is ugly, and I know I should have told you before, but I was afraid you would not want me if you knew. I will understand if you want to call off the wedding. I should not have deceived you." Ben sat very still for a long moment. His jaw worked, and his eyes were bright with an emotion Olivia could not quite name. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "I do not want to call off the wedding, and you did not deceive me. You were protecting yourself, which is what anyone would do. As for scars, they are not ugly. They are evidence that you survived something terrible. They are proof of your strength." "You do not have to say that," Olivia whispered. "I am not just saying it, I mean it." He squeezed her hand gently. If you will still have me, I would be honored to marry you the day after tomorrow. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to be afraid again." They sat together in the wagon for a long time, hands clasped, while Olivia cried quietly and Ben waited with infinite patience. Around them, the desert stretched vast and empty, witness to this moment of fragile trust and tentative hope. Eventually, they continued their drive, and the conversation turned to lighter topics. Ben told her funny stories about his animals, about a particularly stubborn bull and a horse with a talent for opening gate latches. Olivia found herself laughing, the sound rusty from disuse but genuine. She told him about her work as a seamstress, about the satisfaction of creating something beautiful from mere fabric and thread. She described the dresses she had made for wealthy Philadelphia ladies, their elaborate designs and expensive materials. "Maybe you could make curtains for the house," Ben suggested. "It is pretty bare inside. I do not have much of a sense for decorating. A woman's touch would improve things considerably." "I would like that," Olivia said. The idea of making the ranch house into a real home, a place that reflected her own taste and personality, was appealing. It made the future feel more real, less like a frightening unknown. By the time Ben returned her to the Hendersons that afternoon, Olivia felt lighter than she had in years. She had been honest with him, or at least more honest than she had ever been with anyone, and he had not rejected her. He had promised protection, had looked at her with respect rather than pity or disgust. It was more than she had hoped for. The next day passed in a flurry of preparation. Mrs. Henderson helped Olivia press her best dress, a simple gray cotton with a white collar that would serve as a wedding dress. There was no money for anything fancy, and besides, frontier weddings were practical affairs. Mrs. Henderson also lent Olivia a beautiful ivory comb for her hair and insisted on baking a cake for the occasion. "It is not every day we have a wedding in Douglas," she said cheerfully. "We must celebrate properly." That evening, Olivia took a long bath in the tin tub in the Hendersons' kitchen. She washed her long, dark hair and scrubbed her skin until it glowed. Standing before the small mirror in her room afterward, she examined her reflection critically. She was not beautiful, she thought, but she was not ugly either. She had a pleasant face, with dark eyes and a generous mouth. Her hair, when properly brushed, fell in thick waves past her shoulders. She was thin, too thin perhaps, but ranch life would probably help with that. Mrs. Henderson's cooking was certainly hearty enough. She thought about the next night, her wedding night, and felt a complicated mixture of emotions. Fear was there, certainly. Her experience with men had taught her to expect pain and humiliation, but there was also curiosity and a fragile hope. Ben had been nothing but gentle with her. Perhaps it would be different with him. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and hot. Olivia dressed with shaking hands, fumbling with the buttons of her dress. Mrs. Henderson came to help, chattering encouragingly about what a lovely bride Olivia made and how fortunate she was to be marrying Ben Drake. The ceremony took place at the small church in Douglas, a simple adobe building with rough wooden pews. The preacher was an elderly man named Reverend Thompson, who traveled a circuit through the territory, performing marriages and baptisms and funerals wherever he was needed. Besides the preacher, Ben and Olivia, there were only a handful of witnesses. The Hendersons, Senora Martinez from Ben's ranch, and two of Ben's neighbors, a couple named the Johnsons who had a homestead about 10 miles from Ben's place. Ben wore clean work clothes and a new shirt that looked stiff with starch. His hair was neatly combed and his face freshly shaved. When Olivia entered the church on Mr. Henderson's arm, Ben turned to look at her, and his expression made her breath catch. He looked at her as though she was something precious, something to be treasured. No one had ever looked at her that way before. The ceremony was brief and simple. They exchanged vows in quiet voices, promising to love and honor each other for as long as they lived. Ben's hand was steady when he slipped a plain gold band onto Olivia's finger. Her own hand trembled, but she managed to slide a matching band onto his finger without dropping it. When Reverend Thompson pronounced them husband and wife, Ben leaned down to kiss her gently on the cheek, a chaste touch that was over almost before it began. Afterward, they shared cake and coffee in the church hall, and the small gathering offered their congratulations and well wishes. Senora Martinez hugged Olivia tightly and whispered in accented English, "He is a good man, your husband. You will be happy, I think." By early afternoon, Ben was helping Olivia into the wagon for the ride to the ranch. This time, there was no need to return to town. She was his wife now, and the ranch was her home. The 5-mile journey passed in companionable silence. Olivia watched the landscape and tried to quiet the anxiety building in her chest. She was married now. Whatever happened next, there was no going back. She had placed her life and her future in the hands of a man she barely knew, and she could only pray that her instincts about him were correct. When they arrived at the ranch, Ben helped her down from the wagon and carried her bag into the house. The interior was indeed bare, as he had warned. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a wood-burning stove, a rough table with 4 chairs, and a few other basic furnishings. There were 2 other rooms leading off the main space, a bedroom and a small office where Ben kept his ranch records and accounts. "I will sleep in the office tonight," Ben said, setting her bag down. "I do not want you to feel pressured or rushed. We can take our time getting used to being married." Olivia stared at him in surprise. "You do not expect me to share your bed?" "Eventually, yes. I hope we will share a bed like a proper married couple," Ben said, his ears going slightly red. "But I remember what you told me about your past. I figure you might need some time to get comfortable with the idea of being close to a man. I am willing to wait until you are ready." Relief flooded through Olivia, so intense it made her dizzy. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not know what I did to deserve such kindness from you. You do not have to deserve kindness, Olivia. It should just be given freely." He gestured toward the bedroom. "Why do not you get settled in?" "I need to go check on the animals and do the evening feeding. I will be back in about an hour, and we can have supper together. There is some stew left over from yesterday that we can heat up." After he left, Olivia explored her new home more thoroughly. The house was clean but Spartan, clearly the domain of a man living alone. In the bedroom, there was a large bed with a simple frame, a chest of drawers, and a wardrobe. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her dresses and carefully placing her small collection of sewing supplies in one of the drawers. The room felt less empty once her things were in it. She found Ben's things too, his clothes in the wardrobe, his personal items on top of the dresser. It felt strange and intimate to be handling a man's belongings, to be in his private space. She reminded herself that she was his wife now. She had a right to be here. When Ben returned, they worked together to prepare supper. The stew was simple but filling, rich with beef and vegetables. Olivia realized she was hungry and ate more than she expected. Afterward, she insisted on washing the dishes while Ben brought in firewood for the next day. As darkness fell, and they lit the lamps against the gathering night, an awkwardness settled between them. They were strangers sharing a house, bound together by vows and legal documents but not yet by genuine intimacy or understanding. "I suppose I should say good night," Ben said finally. "If you need anything during the night, just call out. I will hear you." "Good night," Olivia replied. "And Ben." Thank you for giving me time. It means more than I can say." He nodded and disappeared into his office, closing the door behind him. Olivia went into the bedroom and changed into her nightgown, then slipped between the sheets. The bed was comfortable, and she could smell sun-dried cotton and a faint masculine scent that must be Ben. It was not unpleasant. She lay in the darkness and listened to the sounds of the ranch settling for the night. This was her life now. She was Olivia Drake, wife of a rancher, mistress of this small but sturdy home. It was so different from anything she had imagined for herself that it felt almost like a dream. The first weeks of marriage passed in a careful dance of politeness and cautious exploration. Ben continued to sleep in his office, giving Olivia the privacy of the bedroom. They worked side by side during the days, establishing routines. Olivia cooked and cleaned, tended the small vegetable garden behind the house, and fed the chickens Ben kept for eggs. Ben worked with the cattle and horses, mended fences, and dealt with the countless small crises that came with running a ranch. Senora Martinez came on Mondays and Thursdays as promised, and she became an unexpected source of wisdom and companionship for Olivia. The older woman had been widowed 10 years earlier and had raised 5 children largely on her own. She was practical and kind, and she taught Olivia the particular skills needed for frontier life: how to bake bread in a temperamental wood stove, how to preserve vegetables for the winter, how to remove scorpions from clothing before dressing. "You are settling in well," Senora Martinez observed one afternoon as she and Olivia worked together to make tortillas. "Ben looks happier than I have seen him in years." "He has been very patient with me," Olivia said, pressing the dough flat with practiced motions. "He is a patient man, yes. But he is also lonely. He needs more than just a housekeeper. He needs a wife, a true partner." Senora Martinez gave Olivia a knowing look. "You are afraid of him still, I think. You do not have to be. He would cut off his own hand before he would hurt you." "I know that in my head," Olivia admitted, "but my heart is slower to understand. Give it time. The heart learns at its own pace." One evening in early October, about 3 weeks after the wedding, Olivia made a decision. She had been thinking about it for days, working up her courage. After supper, when Ben stood to head to his office as usual, she stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Ben, wait, I want to ask you something." He turned, his expression questioning. "Of course. What is it?" Olivia took a deep breath. "I think perhaps it is time we tried to be a real married couple. I do not want you sleeping in that cramped office anymore. The bed is large enough for both of us, and we are husband and wife. It seems foolish to continue this way." Ben studied her face carefully. "Are you sure?" "I do not want you to feel obligated. I meant what I said about waiting." "I am sure," Olivia said, with more confidence than she felt. "I trust you, and I think maybe the only way to get past my fear is to face it." That night, they lay side by side in the darkness, carefully maintaining a respectful distance between them. Both were stiff and uncomfortable, acutely aware of the other's presence. After a long silence, Ben spoke. "Olivia, we do not have to do anything except sleep. I just want you to know that." "I know." She paused, then added in a whisper, "But I want to try. I want to be a proper wife to you. I just do not know how. I'm afraid I will disappoint you." Ben rolled onto his side to face her, though in the darkness they could barely see each other. "You could never disappoint me." "Can I hold you? Just hold you, nothing more." "Yes," Olivia whispered. Ben moved closer and carefully put his arm around her, drawing her against his chest. She fit neatly into the curve of his body, her back against his chest. His warmth enveloped her, and his heartbeat was steady against her shoulder blade. For a moment, panic rose in her throat, memories of rough hands and pain and humiliation. But Ben simply held her, his grip firm but gentle, and gradually her fear subsided. "This is nice," she said after a while, surprised to find she meant it. "Yes," Ben agreed, his breath warm against her hair. "This is very nice." They fell asleep that way, and when Olivia woke in the morning, she was still in Ben's arms. Sometime during the night, she had turned to face him, and her cheek was pressed against his chest. His shirt had come partially unbuttoned, and she could feel the warmth of his skin, the steady rise and fall of his breathing. It felt safe, she realized with wonder. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she felt completely safe. Over the following days, they grew more comfortable with physical proximity. Ben would sometimes put his arm around Olivia's waist when they stood together, or take her hand when they walked. They kissed goodnight before sleeping, gentle kisses that gradually became less chaste and more exploratory. Olivia found herself responding to his touch, her body awakening to sensations she had not known were possible. One night in late October, their kissing grew more heated, and Ben's hands moved over her body with increasing urgency. When he pulled back, breathing hard, and asked if she wanted to continue, Olivia nodded. What followed was tender and careful, with Ben pausing frequently to make sure she was all right, that she was not afraid. There was some discomfort but no pain, and when it was over, Olivia lay in Ben's arms feeling amazed that the marriage act could be like that. Gentle and sweet, a joining rather than a violation. "Are you all right?" Ben asked, stroking her hair. "Yes," Olivia said. "More than all right." "I did not know it could be like that." "It should always be like that," Ben said firmly. "It should always be about two people choosing to be together, not about one person taking from another." As autumn deepened and the weather began to cool, their relationship continued to deepen. They talked late into the night, sharing their histories and their dreams. Ben spoke of his hope to expand the ranch, to build a larger herd and perhaps start breeding horses as well as cattle. Olivia talked about her love of sewing and her dream of perhaps one day having a small dressmaking business, making clothes for the women scattered across the territory who had little access to quality garments. They also spoke of children, the family they both hoped to build. Ben admitted he had always wanted a large family, at least 4 or 5 children. Olivia, who had spent so many years feeling unwanted and unloved, found herself deeply moved by the idea of creating a family of her own, of giving children the love and stability she had never had. One evening in early November, as they lay in bed together, Ben traced his fingers along Olivia's arm, then across her shoulder. She was wearing her nightgown, but he could feel the raised ridges of scar tissue through the thin fabric. He had felt them before, of course, but he had never commented on them, never asked to see them. "Olivia," he said quietly, "would you let me see your back? Would you trust me that much?" Olivia's breath caught. It was the one thing she had not allowed, the one barrier that remained between them. She slept in nightgowns that covered her completely, and when they made love, it was always in the dark or with her back carefully hidden. The thought of letting him see the full extent of the damage filled her with shame and fear. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you want to see?" "Because it is part of you," Ben said simply. "Because you are my wife, and I want to know all of you. And because I think maybe you need to let someone see to stop hiding this burden you have been carrying alone." After a long moment, Olivia nodded. Her hands were shaking as she sat up and reached for the buttons of her nightgown. Ben lit the lamp on the bedside table, keeping the flame low. As Olivia slipped the nightgown down to her waist, exposing her back to him, she closed her eyes and fought the urge to cover herself again. Ben was silent for a long time. Olivia could feel his eyes on her back, taking in the crisscrossing scars that covered her skin from shoulders to waist. Some were thick and raised, while others were thin white lines. They were the record of years of abuse, a testament to cruelty and suffering. Then she felt Ben's fingers, tracing one of the scars with infinite gentleness. He started at her shoulder and followed the line down to her waist. Then he traced another and another, his touch feather-light but deliberate, as though he was memorizing each one. "Olivia," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I am so sorry this happened to you. I am sorry you had to endure this, that no one protected you." "It does not matter now," Olivia said, her own voice thick with unshed tears. "It is in the past." "It matters," Ben said firmly. "It matters because it hurt you, because it left these marks on you. But I want you to understand something." He continued tracing the scars, one after another, his touch tender and reverent. "These do not make you less beautiful. They do not make you damaged or broken. They are proof that you survived. You endured something that would have destroyed a weaker person, and you came through it. You are the strongest person I have ever met." Now the tears did come, falling hot and fast down Olivia's cheeks. Ben pulled her back against his chest, wrapping his arms around her, holding her while she cried. His hands were warm on her bare skin, covering the scars with a gentleness that seemed to soothe the old wounds. "I promise you," Ben said into her hair. "I promise you that no one will ever hurt you like that again. I will protect you with my life if necessary. You are safe now, you are loved. Do you understand?" "Yes," Olivia managed between sobs. "I understand." They sat together for a long time, Ben holding Olivia while she cried out years of pain and shame and fear. When the tears finally subsided, she felt lighter, as though a weight she had been carrying for years had finally been lifted. Ben had seen the worst of her scars, the evidence of her deepest shame, and he had not been repulsed. He had traced each scar with loving fingers and promised protection. He had called her strong and beautiful. That night marked a turning point in their marriage. The last barrier between them had fallen, and Olivia found herself able to be fully herself with Ben in a way she had never been with anyone. She laughed more freely, spoke more openly, allowed herself to hope for happiness, without the constant shadow of fear. As winter approached, they settled into a comfortable rhythm. The days were filled with work, but the evenings were theirs to share. They would sit by the fire after supper, Ben reading aloud from the weekly newspaper that came from Tucson while Olivia sewed or knitted. Sometimes they would play cards or checkers. Often they would simply talk, discussing the ranch, the neighbors, the small events that made up their daily life. In December, a cold snap brought rare snow to the desert, and they woke one morning to find the world transformed into a white wonderland. Ben and Olivia stood on the porch together, marveling at the beauty of it. Olivia had never seen desert snow before, and she was delighted by the way it clung to the cacti and mesquite, making the harsh landscape look soft and magical. "Come on," Ben said, taking her hand. "Let us go for a walk before it melts." They bundled up in coats and scarves and walked hand in hand across the ranch, their breath steaming in the cold air. The cattle looked confused by the white stuff covering their grazing land, and the horses tossed their heads and pranced nervously. Ben and Olivia laughed at their antics, and then Ben bent down and scooped up a handful of snow, packing it into a ball. "You would not dare," Olivia said, backing away with a grin. "Would I not?" Ben asked, his eyes twinkling. He threw the snowball, but deliberately aimed wide so it sailed past her. Olivia laughed and made her own snowball, throwing it at him with better accuracy. It hit him square in the chest, and his expression of mock outrage made her laugh even harder. What followed was a brief but spirited snowball fight that left them both breathless and laughing, covered in snow and grinning like children. When they finally called a truce, Ben pulled Olivia into his arms and kissed her soundly, and she thought that she had never been happier in her entire life. By the time Christmas arrived, Olivia felt truly settled in her new life. She had made friends with some of the neighboring ranch wives, women who would sometimes ride over for visits or meet in town for shopping. She had transformed the bare ranch house into a real home, sewing curtains and cushions, adding small touches that made the space warm and inviting. She had even started taking in some sewing work from women in Douglas, making dresses and mending clothes for extra money. For Christmas, Ben surprised her with a beautiful sewing machine that must have cost him a significant portion of his carefully saved money. Olivia was so touched by the gift that she cried, and Ben looked alarmed until she assured him they were happy tears. She gave him a warm wool coat she had sewn herself, working on it secretly late at night when he was already asleep. They celebrated a quiet Christmas with just the two of them, cooking a special meal and exchanging gifts. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Olivia leaned against Ben's shoulder and said, "I never thought I could be this happy. A year ago, I was alone and afraid, working myself to exhaustion just to survive. Now I have a home and a husband who loves me. It feels like a miracle." "You are the miracle," Ben said, kissing the top of her head. "You came into my life and made it full in a way I did not know was possible. I love you, Olivia, more than I thought I could ever love anyone." "I love you too," Olivia replied, and meant it with her whole heart. What had started as a practical arrangement, a mail-order marriage between strangers, had become something deep and true and lasting. As winter gave way to spring, Olivia began to suspect she might be pregnant. She missed her monthly courses, and she felt queasy in the mornings. She said nothing to Ben at first, afraid to raise his hopes until she was certain. But when another month passed and the signs continued, she could no longer keep the news to herself. She told him one evening in early March, as they were getting ready for bed, "Ben, I think I might be carrying a child. I am not completely certain yet, but all the signs point to it." Ben's face lit up with joy so pure and unfiltered that it took Olivia's breath away. He swept her into his arms and spun her around, laughing. "Are you serious? We are going to have a baby." "I believe so," Olivia said, laughing at his enthusiasm, "though you should probably put me down before you make me dizzy." Ben set her down carefully as though she were made of glass. When will the baby come?" "If my calculations are correct, probably sometime in October. We will have a harvest baby." The months of Olivia's pregnancy were peaceful and happy. Ben was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly worried that she was working too hard or not getting enough rest. Olivia bore his fussing with good humor, touched by his concern even when it was excessive. Senora Martinez came more frequently, helping with the heavier chores and offering advice based on her own experiences with pregnancy and childbirth. As Olivia's belly grew, she sewed tiny clothes and blankets, preparing for the baby's arrival. Ben built a cradle with his own hands, working carefully in the evenings to craft something sturdy and beautiful. They discussed names endlessly, unable to agree on anything. Ben favored traditional names, while Olivia preferred something more unusual. In early October, as the weather began to cool again, and Olivia was feeling enormously pregnant and uncomfortable, they had an unexpected visitor. A man rode up to the ranch one afternoon, calling out a greeting. Ben went out to meet him, and Olivia watched from the porch, curious. The visitor was a man in his 50s, weathered and trail-worn. He introduced himself as Thomas Vance, and Olivia's blood ran cold. That was her surname, her father's name, but her father was dead. All her family was dead, except for the uncle who had abused her, and he was dead too. "I am looking for a woman named Olivia Vance," the man was saying to Ben. "I have reason to believe she might be in this area." "Who is asking?" Ben said, his tone careful and protective. "I am her father's cousin, which makes me her cousin once removed. I have been searching for her for more than a year. I have important news and something that belongs to her." Olivia stepped forward, her hand protectively on her swollen belly. "I am Olivia Vance, or I was. I am Olivia Drake now." Thomas Vance turned to look at her, and his weathered face broke into a smile. "Thank God, I was beginning to think I would never find you." He removed his hat respectfully. "Mrs. Drake, I apologize for showing up unannounced like this. I know you must have questions. Would it be all right if I came inside and explained?" Ben looked at Olivia, silently asking if she was comfortable with this. She nodded, curiosity overcoming her initial alarm. They all went inside, and Olivia made coffee while Thomas Vance settled at the kitchen table. "I suppose I should start at the beginning," he said. "I was close with your father, madam, before his death. We grew up together back in Pennsylvania. When he and your mother died, I was traveling out west, working cattle drives. By the time I got back and heard what had happened, you had already been sent to live with Martin Vance, your uncle on your mother's side." "You knew my father?" Olivia asked, sitting down carefully. "You knew my parents?" "I did indeed. Your father was a good man, one of the best I have ever known. When I heard that Martin Vance had gotten custody of you, I was troubled. I knew Martin's reputation. He was a drunk and a bully, but I was not in a position to do anything about it at the time. I had no money, no stable home to offer you. I told myself you would be all right." Thomas's face was grim. "A few years later, when I had finally saved enough to settle down, I went back to Philadelphia to find you. I thought maybe I could offer you a better situation, maybe bring you west where life was freer. But when I got there, I learned that Martin had died and you had disappeared. No one knew where you had gone. I have been searching ever since, following leads, checking records. Finally, I found the agency that arranged mail-order marriages, and they told me you had gone to Douglas, Arizona Territory, to marry a rancher named Benjamin Drake." "That must have been quite a search," Ben said. "But you said you had news and something that belonged to Olivia. What would that be?" Thomas reached into his coat and pulled out a leather envelope, worn and creased. "Before your parents died, your father set up a trust. It was not a fortune, but it was a decent sum of money meant to provide for your future. The trust was supposed to go to you when you turned 21, administered by a lawyer in Philadelphia. But Martin Vance, as your guardian, contested the trust, claiming he needed the money for your care. There was a legal battle, and eventually the court ruled that the money should be held until you were 25, at which point it would be released to you directly." Olivia was stunned. "I did not know anything about this. I never heard about any trust." Martin made sure of that. "He did not want you to know, because if you had known, you might have fought for your rights, might have sought help to escape him." Thomas pushed the envelope across the table. "You are 23 now, so you have 2 more years until the trust matures. But I wanted to find you, to let you know it exists, and to give you this." Olivia opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside were legal documents outlining the trust, which amounted to nearly $3,000. There was also a letter, written in handwriting she recognized instantly as her father's. "He wrote that before he died," Thomas said quietly. "He and your mother were both very ill. They knew they might not recover. He wanted you to have his words to know how much he loved you." Olivia could not read the letter right then. Her eyes were too blurred with tears. She clutched it to her chest and tried to compose herself. "Thank you," she managed. "Thank you for searching for me, for bringing me this. It was the least I could do. Your father was like a brother to me. I failed him when I let you suffer under Martin's care. I am just glad to see that you seem to have found happiness despite everything." Thomas looked between Olivia and Ben. "You are clearly well loved and you have a child on the way. Your father would be proud." Thomas stayed for dinner and spent the night in the barn, as they had no guest room. The next morning he prepared to leave, but before he did, he gave Olivia an address in California where he was settling. "If you ever need anything, you write to me," he said. "You are family and family looks after each other. I should have done it years ago. I would like to do it now if you will let me." "I would like that," Olivia said, surprised to find she meant it. "Thank you, Cousin Thomas." After he left, Olivia and Ben sat together, and she finally read her father's letter. It was full of love and encouragement, full of advice for her future and expressions of pride in the girl she was becoming. He wrote about how much he and her mother loved her, how they had hoped to see her grow up and make a life of her own. He apologized for leaving her, for not being able to protect her. He urged her to be brave, to find happiness, to never let the hardships of life make her bitter. By the time she finished reading, Olivia was crying again, but these were healing tears. For so long she had felt utterly alone in the world, abandoned and unloved. Now she knew that her parents had loved her, had tried to provide for her even in death. And she had a cousin who cared enough to spend years searching for her. She was not alone. She had never been alone. "Are you all right?" Ben asked, holding her close. "Yes," Olivia said. "I am more than all right. I feel like a part of me that was missing has been found. I wish I had known my parents better, that I had more time with them. But at least now I know they loved me. That means everything." 2 weeks later, on a crisp October morning, Olivia went into labor. Ben immediately rode for Senora Martinez and the doctor from Douglas, then paced anxiously outside the bedroom while the women attended to Olivia. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the day and into the night. Ben could hear Olivia crying out in pain, and it took every ounce of self-control not to burst into the room to be with her. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, he heard a different sound, the thin, wailing cry of a newborn baby. A few minutes later, Senora Martinez opened the door, her face tired but smiling. "You have a son, Ben. A big, healthy boy, and Olivia is tired but well." Ben rushed into the room. Olivia was propped up in bed, pale and exhausted, her hair damp with sweat. But she was smiling, and in her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had sewn. Ben approached slowly, awed by the sight. "Come meet your son," Olivia said softly. Ben sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby. He had a shock of dark hair and a red, squashed face that was somehow the most beautiful thing Ben had ever seen. Tiny fists waved in the air, and dark eyes that would probably turn blue or gray like Ben's own were trying to focus. "He is perfect," Ben breathed. "You did so well, Olivia." "You are amazing." "We need to name him," Olivia said. "We never did agree on a name." "What about James?" Ben suggested. "After my father, James Benjamin Drake." "I like that," Olivia said. "Jamie, little Jamie Drake." Ben carefully took the baby from Olivia's arms, cradling him with infinite care. He looked down at his son and felt his heart swell with love so fierce it was almost painful. This tiny person was his responsibility, his to protect and guide and love. He would make sure Jamie grew up knowing he was wanted, knowing he was loved. He would give Jamie everything that Olivia had been denied in her own childhood. "Hello, Jamie," he said softly. "Welcome to the world, son. Your mother and I have been waiting for you." The first months of parenthood were exhausting but joyful. Jamie was a healthy baby with a good appetite and strong lungs. He kept them up at night with his crying, but neither Ben nor Olivia minded. They took turns walking him, soothing him, changing his diapers. During the day, Olivia would strap Jamie to her in a sling that Senora Martinez showed her how to make, keeping him close while she worked. Ben would come in from the ranch several times a day to check on them both, never quite able to believe that he had a wife and son, that he had a real family. As winter settled in again, they celebrated Jamie's first Christmas. He was too young to understand, of course, but Olivia and Ben reveled in the joy of having a child to celebrate with. They hung a stocking for him and bought him simple toys. Olivia sewed him new clothes, and Ben carved him a wooden horse. By the time Jamie was 6 months old, Olivia began to suspect she was pregnant again. When her suspicions were confirmed, she was both delighted and slightly daunted. 2 children so close together would be a challenge. But Ben was overjoyed at the news, and his happiness was infectious. Their second child, a daughter they named Caroline Rose, was born in October of 1885, exactly 2 years after Jamie. She was smaller than her brother had been, with delicate features and wispy blonde hair that surprised them both, as neither Ben nor Olivia were blonde. But Olivia's grandmother had been blonde, and so the trait had simply skipped a generation. With 2 small children, life on the ranch became even busier. But Olivia thrived on it. She loved being a mother, loved watching her children grow and learn. Jamie was a serious, thoughtful child who adored his father and wanted to follow him everywhere. Caroline was sunny and affectionate, always laughing and babbling. When Olivia turned 25, the trust fund her father had set up matured, and the money was released to her. $3,000 was a significant sum, and she and Ben discussed carefully what to do with it. They decided to use some of it to expand the ranch, buying additional land and more cattle. They also set aside a portion for the children's future, starting education funds for both Jamie and Caroline. And Olivia used some of the money to have a small addition built onto the house, adding a proper guest room and a larger kitchen. Years passed in a blur of hard work and simple happiness. Jamie and Caroline were joined by 2 more children. A second son, Thomas Martin, named for cousin Thomas, and for the uncle whose memory Olivia had decided to reclaim and redefine, and another daughter, Rose Ellen. The house was always full of noise and activity, with children running and playing, animals to be tended, meals to be cooked, clothes to be washed. Through it all, Ben and Olivia's love for each other only deepened. They had built something real and lasting, a partnership based on trust and mutual respect. They still made time for each other, stealing moments of quiet conversation or physical intimacy when the children were asleep. They still laughed together, worked together, supported each other through the inevitable challenges and hardships of ranch life. Sometimes, late at night, when the children were all asleep and the house was finally quiet, Olivia would lie in Ben's arms and think about how far she had come. She had arrived in Douglas as a frightened young woman with scars on her back and scars on her soul, expecting nothing more than survival. Instead, she had found love, protection, and a happiness she had never dared to hope for. And sometimes, Ben would trace the scars on her back as he had done that first time, his touch gentle and reverent. The scars were still there, of course. They would always be there, but they no longer represented shame and suffering. Now they were simply part of her history, evidence of where she had been and what she had survived. They were proof of her strength, just as Ben had said all those years ago. One evening in the spring of 1895, when Jamie was 13 and preparing to start helping with the ranch work in earnest, Olivia stood on the porch watching the sunset. The sky was ablaze with color, orange and pink and purple streaking across the vast expanse. Ben came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything," Olivia said. "How different my life is from what I expected. How grateful I am." "I am the one who should be grateful," Ben said. "You took a chance on me on this life. You gave me everything I ever wanted." Olivia turned in his arms to face him. "We gave it to each other," she corrected. "We built this together." From inside the house came the sound of children laughing, of Caroline calling for her mother, of little Rose singing to herself. It was the sound of home, of family, of love. "Yes," Ben agreed, kissing her softly. "We built it together." As the years continued to pass, their life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Jamie grew into a capable young man who loved the ranch and was eager to take on more responsibility. Caroline showed a talent for healing and often helped neighbors with minor injuries and illnesses, learning from the doctor in Douglas. Thomas was adventurous and wild, always getting into mischief but with a good heart underneath. Rose was gentle and artistic, spending hours drawing and painting the desert landscape. Ben and Olivia watched their children grow with pride and no small amount of amazement. They had created this family out of nothing, had built a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. The ranch prospered, growing larger and more successful with each passing year. They became respected members of the community, known for their generosity and fairness. Cousin Thomas remained a part of their lives, visiting every few years and maintaining regular correspondence. He never married, but he seemed content with his bachelor life in California. He always brought gifts for the children and news of the wider world beyond Douglas. Senora Martinez grew older and eventually had to stop her regular work, but she remained a close friend and was treated as family. Olivia made sure she never wanted for anything, providing her with food and help as her own children had done for their aging mother. When Jamie turned 21 in 1906, Ben and Olivia officially made him a partner in the ranch. It was time to start thinking about succession, about ensuring that what they had built would continue. Jamie had proven himself capable and dedicated, and he had recently started courting a young woman from a neighboring ranch. There would be another generation soon, more grandchildren to love and spoil. One afternoon, as Olivia sat on the porch doing needlework, she realized with some surprise that she was now 46 years old. How had so much time passed? It seemed like just yesterday she had been a frightened young woman stepping off the stagecoach in Douglas. Now she was middle-aged, with gray threading through her dark hair and laugh lines around her eyes. Her children were grown or nearly so. Her life was more than half over. But she had no regrets. She had lived a full and happy life, richer than anything she could have imagined during those dark years with her uncle. She had known love, had given love, had created new life and watched it flourish. The scars on her back were still there, faded but permanent. But they no longer defined her. She was so much more than the suffering she had endured. Ben came out onto the porch and sat beside her, his own hair now liberally streaked with gray. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the sun move across the sky. "What are you thinking about?" Ben asked, echoing the question he had asked so many times over the years. "About us," Olivia said. "About how grateful I am for every day I have had with you, even the hard days." Ben asked with a slight smile. "Especially the hard days," Olivia said, "because we got through them together." Ben took her hand, his grip still strong and warm after all these years. "I love you, Olivia Drake. I have loved you since the day you stepped off that stagecoach, looking scared and brave at the same time. I will love you until the day I die." "And I love you," Olivia said. "You saved me, Ben. You gave me back my life." "No," Ben said firmly. "You saved yourself. I just had the good fortune to be there when you did." As the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Olivia leaned against her husband's shoulder and felt at peace. This was her life, this was her home, and these were her people. She had traveled from darkness into light, from fear into love. And though the journey had been difficult, even painful at times, she would not change a single moment of it. Because every step, every struggle, every scar had led her here, to this porch, to this man, to this life. And it was a good life, a beautiful life, a life worth living. Years later, when Olivia was in her early 50s, she received word that the agency in Philadelphia that had arranged mail-order marriages was closing down. The woman who had run it was retiring, and she sent letters to all the couples she had brought together, asking how their marriages had turned out. She hoped to compile stories of success to prove that mail-order marriages could work. Olivia sat down at her writing desk and composed a long letter describing her life with Ben, their children, and the happiness they had found together. She wrote about how she had arrived in Douglas broken and afraid, and how Ben had shown her that love did not have to hurt, that marriage could be a partnership of equals, that trust could be rebuilt even after it had been shattered. She did not mention the scars on her back or the abuse she had suffered. Those were private memories, not for public consumption. But she wrote about finding safety and acceptance, about being valued for who she was rather than judged for her past. She wrote about the family they had created and the legacy they were building. When she finished the letter, she read it over and felt satisfied that it captured the truth of her experience. She sealed it and gave it to Ben to mail the next time he went into Douglas. He read the address and smiled. "I am glad you are telling your story," he said. "Other women in situations like yours might be encouraged to take the chance to reach for something better." "I hope so," Olivia said. "I hope they find what I found. Everyone deserves that kind of happiness." By the time Olivia turned 60 in 1920, she was a grandmother several times over. Jamie and his wife had given them 3 grandchildren, and Caroline, now married to a doctor in Tucson, had 2 children of her own. Thomas had settled in California, following in cousin Thomas's footsteps, and had started a family there. Only Rose remained unmarried, living at home and teaching at the school in Douglas. Ben was 65 now, still strong but beginning to slow down. He had turned over most of the day-to-day running of the ranch to Jamie, though he still went out most days to check on things and offer advice. He and Olivia had more time to themselves now, time to simply enjoy each other's company. They would sit together in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing, remembering the years behind them and marveling at how quickly time had passed. Sometimes their grandchildren would come to visit, and the house would fill again with the noise and chaos of young children. Olivia loved those visits, loved holding babies and telling stories to wide-eyed toddlers. But she also loved the quiet that came after, when it was just her and Ben again. One evening, as they sat together watching another spectacular desert sunset, Ben turned to Olivia and said, "I have been thinking about something." "What is that?" Olivia asked. "About how different our lives might have been if you had not answered my advertisement. If you had stayed in Philadelphia, or if you had chosen a different man, a different territory." "I try not to think about that," Olivia said with a slight shudder. "I do not think I would have survived much longer in Philadelphia. I was desperate when I answered your advertisement." "You were my last hope." "And you were mine," Ben said. "I was so lonely, Olivia. I had begun to think I would spend my whole life alone, that I was not meant for love or family. And then you came and everything changed. You made me believe in happiness again." "We made each other believe," Olivia said. She reached for his hand and they sat together in the golden light, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built a life that exceeded either of their dreams. As the years continued to advance, they both began to slow down. Ben developed arthritis in his hands and knees, and Olivia's eyesight began to fail, making her detailed sewing work difficult. But they adapted, finding new ways to be useful and productive. Ben focused on the business side of the ranch, managing accounts and planning. Olivia turned to larger sewing projects that did not require such fine detail, making quilts and blankets for her growing collection of grandchildren and great-grandchildren. In 1932, they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. Jamie and his family organized a large party at the ranch, inviting friends and neighbors from all over the territory. Cousin Thomas, now in his 90s but still spry, made the journey from California. All 4 of their children were there, along with their spouses and children, and even a few great-grandchildren. As Olivia looked around at the gathered crowd, at the family she and Ben had created, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude and love. 50 years ago, she had stepped off a stagecoach in Douglas, terrified and scarred and alone. Now she was surrounded by people who loved her, by children and grandchildren who existed because she had taken a chance on a new life. Ben stood beside her, his arm around her waist, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "What do you think?" he asked quietly. "Was it worth it?" "Every moment," Olivia said firmly. "Every single moment." They cut into a large cake that Caroline had made, and everyone raised glasses of lemonade and wine to toast the happy couple. Speeches were made, stories were told, and laughter filled the air. As the sun began to set, someone brought out a fiddle and played music, and despite their age and infirmity, Ben and Olivia danced together under the desert sky, moving slowly to the familiar melodies of their youth. "I love you," Ben whispered in her ear as they swayed together. "Thank you for saying yes all those years ago. Thank you for giving me this life. Thank you for keeping your promise," Olivia whispered back. "Thank you for protecting me, for loving me, for tracing my scars and making me believe I was worthy of love." "You were always worthy," Ben said. "You just needed someone to help you see it." As they danced, surrounded by family and friends, Olivia thought about the young woman she had been and the woman she had become. The scars on her back were still there, hidden beneath her dress, faded but permanent. But they no longer represented pain and shame. Now they were symbols of survival, of strength, of a journey that had led her to love and happiness. Ben had traced those scars on their wedding night and promised protection. He had kept that promise every day for 50 years. And in return, Olivia had given him her heart, her trust, and her unwavering love. Together they had built something beautiful and lasting, a family and a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. As the music played and the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Ben and Olivia danced on. 2 souls who had found each other in the vast wilderness of the American West and created their own happily ever after. Their story was one of healing and hope, of love conquering fear, of 2 broken people becoming whole together. And it was a story that would be told and retold by their descendants for generations to come, a testament to the power of love and the possibility of redemption. The evening wound down as guests began to depart, some with long journeys ahead of them. Ben and Olivia stood on the porch, waving goodbye to each carriage and automobile, their hands clasped together. When the last visitor had gone and only their immediate family remained, helping to clean up and put things away, they finally sat down together in their favorite chairs. "I am exhausted," Olivia admitted with a soft laugh. "But it was wonderful." "It was perfect," Ben agreed. He looked at her with the same love and admiration he had shown 50 years earlier. "You are perfect." "Hardly," Olivia said, but she smiled. We are both old and creaky now, full of aches and pains. Maybe, Ben said, but we are old and creaky together, and that makes all the difference. In 1938, as Olivia was approaching her 78th birthday, Ben fell seriously ill. It started as a simple cold but developed into pneumonia. Despite the best efforts of doctors and the devoted nursing of his family, his condition worsened. Olivia sat by his bedside day and night, holding his hand and talking to him, telling him stories of their life together, reminding him of all the beautiful moments they had shared. "You have to fight," she told him one night, tears streaming down her face. "You cannot leave me yet. We still have more life to live together." Ben squeezed her hand weakly. His breathing was labored, but his eyes were clear and focused on her face. "Olivia," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "you have been the greatest joy of my life. Every day with you has been a gift. I do not regret a single moment." "Do not talk like that," Olivia said. "You are going to get better. You are strong. You can beat this." But Ben shook his head slightly. "I do not think so, my love. I think my time is coming to an end, but I want you to know that I am not afraid. I have lived a full and happy life. I have been blessed beyond measure." "Ben, please," Olivia sobbed. "Promise me something," Ben said. "Promise me that you will not grieve too long. You still have time, Olivia. You still have our children and grandchildren who need you. Do not let my death make you bitter or sad. Remember the happiness we shared and keep living." "I promise," Olivia whispered, even though the thought of life without him seemed impossible. Ben died 3 days later, peacefully in his sleep with Olivia holding his hand. He was 83 years old and had lived a good, honorable life. His funeral was attended by hundreds of people, testament to the impact he had made on his community. He was buried on a hill overlooking the ranch he had built, with a simple stone marker bearing his name and the dates of his birth and death. Olivia felt as though part of her had died with him. For 55 years, he had been her constant companion, her protector, her love. Life without him felt empty and colorless, but she had made him a promise, and she intended to keep it. She continued to live at the ranch, now fully run by Jamie and his sons. She spent her days with her family, telling stories to her great-grandchildren, passing on the wisdom and memories of a life well lived. She lived for another 4 years after Ben's death, growing frailer but maintaining her spirit and her love of family. On a warm October evening in 1942, as the desert sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors, Olivia died peacefully in her sleep. She was 82 years old. Her family buried her next to Ben on the hill overlooking the ranch, their graves marked by matching stones. At the funeral, Jamie spoke about his parents' love story, about how they had found each other through a mail-order advertisement and built a marriage that had lasted more than half a century. He spoke about the legacy they had left, not just in the land and the cattle, but in the family they had created and the values they had instilled. "My father taught us about hard work and integrity," Jamie said to the gathered crowd. "My mother taught us about resilience and the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. Together, they showed us what a true partnership looks like, what it means to face life's challenges side by side. We are all better people because of them." As the sun set over the desert that evening, the family gathered on the hill where Ben and Olivia were buried. They stood together in the golden light, multiple generations united by the love of two people who had taken a chance on each other all those years ago. The scars on Olivia's back, which had once represented suffering and shame, had become part of a larger story of healing and hope, of love conquering fear, of two souls finding their home in each other. And though both Ben and Olivia were gone, their love story lived on in the hearts of their descendants. a testament to the transformative power of love and the possibility of finding happiness even in the most unlikely circumstances. The ranch they had built together continued to thrive, passed down through generations, a living monument to what two people could create when they chose to love and trust each other. In the years that followed, their great-grandchildren would sometimes ride out to the hill where Ben and Olivia were buried and sit together in the shade of the mesquite trees that had grown there. They would look out over the land their ancestors had claimed from the wilderness and feel connected to something larger than themselves, to a story of courage and love that had shaped their family's destiny. And sometimes, when the wind blew just right across the desert, carrying the scent of sage and dust and possibility, it seemed as though Ben and Olivia were still there somehow, still watching over the family they had created, still dancing together under the vast Arizona sky, forever bound by the love they had found in the Wild West more than a century ago. Their story had begun with scars and fear, with a desperate young woman and a lonely rancher who dared to hope for something better. It had unfolded in the harsh beauty of the frontier, where life was hard but also filled with possibility. And it had ended with a legacy of love that would endure long after both of them had returned to the dust from which they came. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth celebrating. Because in the end, it was proof that love could heal even the deepest wounds, that trust could be rebuilt after betrayal, and that two broken people could become whole together. It was a story of protection promised and protection given, of scars traced with gentle fingers and transformed from symbols of shame into symbols of strength. Ben and Olivia Drake had lived there happily ever after, and in doing so, they had given that gift to all the generations that followed. Their love story was complete, their ending happy, their legacy secure. And that, perhaps, was the greatest triumph of all,